Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Authorities in Wayne County, Michigan say that a 14-year-old boy is recovering at a local hospital this week after he jumped from a highway overpass while allegedly trying to escape from police during the middle of a vehicle chase. According to reports, the situation began at around 7 p.m. on October 12th, when police in the city of Woodhaven put out an alert to other law enforcement in the area. 3 brand new Mustang Shelby GT500s had been stolen from Ford's Flat Rock assembly plant, and they believed that the perpetrators were heading north. Not long after this report was made, officers from nearby Brownstown Charter Township spotted the 3 stolen vehicles traveling on the I-75 and attempted to make a traffic stop. However, all 3 drivers refused to cooperate and began to speed away. Focusing their attention on one of the Mustangs, police followed as it continued on into southwestern Detroit. Finally, authorities caught a lucky break when the vehicle ran out of gas on Pleasant Street and was forced to stop. However, rather than giving up, the 14-year-old suspect behind the wheel reportedly tried to make one last desperate bid to escape. After getting out of the stolen car, he reportedly jumped from a highway overpass, plummeting between 25 to 30 feet to the ground below. Understandably, this was the end of the pursuit, and emergency responders were called to the scene to take the teenager to the hospital. While it said that he did not suffer any life-threatening injuries, at least one representative from the Brownstown Police Department stated that the 14-year-old likely didn't realize just how high the drop from the overpass was. At the time of this recording, it appears that authorities are still trying to track down the other 2 stolen vehicles, each of which are said to be worth roughly $113,000 apiece. Police say that they are also investigating whether this week's incident could be part of a larger vehicle theft ring that is targeting the Ford Flat Rock assembly plant. Just the night before, the same lot at the facility was hit, and 4 other Mustangs were stolen. And last month, 12 more vehicles were taken in a similar incident. Police theorized that those organizing the crimes could be using juveniles to carry out the actual thefts in order to distance themselves from the crimes, and because these young offenders usually get off with lighter punishments if caught. The situation is still developing. Representatives from Florida's Nassau County Sheriff's Office say that 2 men are facing attempted murder charges this week after they were allegedly involved in a violent road rage incident, which ended with both of them shooting each other's young daughters. According to reports, the incident began sometime on October 8th, when police received a 911 call about 2 men driving erratically on Highway 1 near the town of Callahan. The caller stated that it looked like the drivers were involved in some kind of dangerous, quote, cat and mouse chase, and were repeatedly braking in front of each other and trying to run each other off the road. Not long after, police reportedly received 2 more 911 calls, this time from the drivers' wives. The women each eventually agreed to get their husbands to pull over so that they could speak with a deputy. When officers arrived at the scene, they allegedly found the 2 men in question, 43-year-old Frank Allison and 35-year-old William Joseph Hale, fighting at the side of the road. They also discovered that both of the men's daughters, ages 14 and 5, were suffering from gunshot wounds. The 5-year-old had reportedly been shot in the right leg, while the 14-year-old had been shot in the back, leaving her with a collapsed lung. After breaking the 2 fathers up, police began questioning them about what had led to the violent altercation. Both allegedly claimed that it was the other's fault, and that they were simply trying to de-escalate the situation. Though it's unclear what actually started the road rage incident, police allege that as the men were trying to run each other off the road, things escalated when Hale pulled his Dodge pickup truck alongside Allison's Nissan SUV to shout at him. While Hale was shouting, Allison's wife allegedly flipped him the bird, and in response, someone in Hale's vehicle threw a water bottle, which apparently hit her. In retaliation for this, Allison pulled out a handgun and fired a shot at Hale's vehicle, which hit his 5-year-old daughter in the leg. While speaking to police, Allison claimed that he fired the shot, quote, to get out of the situation. According to Hale, he initially didn't realize what had happened. However, as soon as he noticed his daughter was injured, he whipped out a gun of his own and sped up. He then proceeded to empty his clip while firing at Allison's vehicle, with one of the rounds going through the back and hitting his 14-year-old daughter. Both of the injured girls were rushed to the hospital after police arrived and are reportedly expected to make full recoveries. Needless to say, both of their fathers were arrested at the scene and have now been charged with attempted second-degree murder. Speaking about the incident at a press conference this week, Nassau County Sheriff Bill Leeper lambasted both of the fathers' incredibly reckless actions, saying, quote, there could have been 2 dead kids because of 2 stupid grown men. At the time of this recording, Hale and Allison have reportedly both been released on a $150,000 bond. Representatives from North Carolina's Burlington Police Department say that the suspect behind a violent attempted home invasion was able to be tracked down and arrested this week after he unintentionally left a piece of himself behind at the crime scene. According to reports, the whole thing started at around 7 a.m. on October 6th, when Burlington police were called to a residence on Sellers Mill Road. There, they were met by the injured homeowner, who explained that he had just been the victim of a violent attack. The man said that he had left his house that morning to start his car, but as he was walking back inside, he was approached by an unknown man with a gun. The suspect tried to force his way into the residence, prompting a struggle in which the unknown man fired his gun. Luckily for the homeowner, the bullet had only grazed his chest, allowing him to shut the door on the suspect and call for help. It was only after the man fled the scene and police had arrived that the victim realized that he had quite literally shut the door on his attacker, or his finger to be exact. He had apparently done this with such force that the man's severed digit was found inside a glove that he had left behind at the crime scene. Forgive us the lame wordplay, but this turned out to be exactly the lucky break police needed, and the finger was subsequently used to track down the suspect. He has now been identified as 67-year-old Vernon Forrest Wilson. According to reports, Wilson was arrested on charges including first-degree burglary, assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill inflicting serious injury, and possession of a firearm by a felon. At the time of this recording, he remains in police custody in lieu of a $250,000 bond. Representatives from Florida's Hendry County Sheriff's Department say that they have officially charged a 43-year-old bodybuilder with the murder of his ex-wife this week, after they allegedly recovered her remains from a burn pit in the backyard of his home. According to reports, the case began sometime on the morning of September 30th, when police received a call from a friend of 39-year-old Katie Bonnick. The friend explained that the previous night, Katie had left her 2 children in her care, while she went over to her ex-husband's house to pick up some clothes for them. However, she had never returned, and she was now worried for Katie's safety. When officers contacted several of Katie's other friends and family members, they claimed that they couldn't reach her either. It was at this point that attention turned to Katie's ex-husband, 43-year-old Ian Bonnick. When officers traveled to Bonnick's home in the city of LaBelle, no one appeared to be home, though Katie's car was parked on the driveway and her purse was clearly visible inside. Police came back a short time later and received no answer at the door for a second time. However, Katie's car had now been moved to a different spot. After this, police obtained 2 different search warrants for the property. During searches of the residence, officers quickly discovered 13 vials of steroids, which was enough to arrest Bonnick and hold him in custody while they continued their investigation. Over the next 4 days, they reportedly uncovered a large amount of evidence related to the case. This included signs of a physical struggle in the garage and foyer of the house, as well as blood in Bonnick's truck and in the hallway. Inside a safe that allegedly contained dozens of unregistered silencers, police also found Katie's wedding band and engagement ring, both of which she had been wearing prior to her disappearance. The most disturbing discovery by far, however, came when police conducted a search of the backyard. There, they allegedly found a fresh burn pile, which contained part of a human jawbone and a tooth. Nearby was a 50-gallon barrel, one which also contained bone fragments and which reportedly smelled like decomposing remains. These remains were later confirmed to be those of Katie Bonnick. When officers questioned Bonnick about these discoveries, he claimed to have no knowledge of what had happened to his ex-wife. He said that on the night she went missing, she had come over to his house and they had gotten into a fight, but that he had gone to sleep because he didn't want to argue. He claimed that when he woke up, she was gone. When authorities pressed him on the details of the evidence they had found at the scene, Bonnick allegedly replied that they didn't have a body and that he didn't believe that Katie was actually missing. He also apparently claimed that the blood in his truck was from, quote, groceries. On October 10th, police formally charged Bonnick with a number of offenses, including first-degree murder, destroying/concealing physical evidence, use of a two-way communication device to facilitate a felony, illegally cremating a body, and failure to report death to a medical examiner. At the time of this recording, Bonnick reportedly remains in custody with no bond. Representatives from California's Stockton Police Department say that a suspected serial killer is finally off the city's streets this week after he was caught while allegedly hunting for his next victim. According to reports, the case began back on September 30th when Stockton police revealed that they were looking for a man who they believed was behind a series of deadly shooting attacks. These attacks had started in April of 2021 in Oakland, but had picked up recently, with 5 victims being killed in Stockton between July 8th and September 27th of this year. In all, investigators had linked 7 victims to the suspect, 6 of whom had died. In each of the shootings, the victims had been alone when they were attacked, and none of their belongings were stolen. The surviving victim, a 46-year-old woman named Natasha Latour, told police that she had been ambushed by the suspect, and that he didn't even say a word to her before attacking. The deceased victims have since been identified as 39-year-old Juan Serrano, 35-year-old Paul Yaw, 43-year-old Salvador DeBuddy Jr., 21-year-old Jonathan Rodriguez, 52-year-old Juan Cruz, and 54-year-old Lawrence Lopez. At the time of their initial announcement, police stated that the suspect was still unidentified and appealed to the public for information. Thanks to a wave of tips, as well as photos and video surveillance footage taken from the various crime scenes, police were finally able to zero in on a suspect, a 43-year-old man named Wesley Brownlee. According to investigators, while under surveillance in the early morning hours of October 15th, Brownlee was observed by officers acting suspiciously. He was driving around to several parks and dark locations around Stockton, stopping and looking around before moving on. Fearing that he might be looking for someone to attack, police pulled Brownlee over. When they did, he was reportedly dressed in black, wearing a mask around his neck, and had a gun by his side. He was immediately arrested and at the current time remains in custody. At the time of this recording, few other details are available about the investigation, and it's unclear whether Brownlee is yet facing any charges. The situation is still developing. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a hapless thief is in custody this week after he resorted to using a literal handgun to hold up a local bank. According to reports, the incident took place at around 1:25 p.m. on October 10th, when 56-year-old Paul James Sinclair walked into a Chase Bank branch in the city of Seminole. After approaching one of the tellers, he held his hand in the shape of a gun, stuck it underneath his shirt, and demanded that she hand over cash. Surprisingly, this tactic was actually somewhat successful, and the teller handed Sinclair $120 before sending him on his way. Unfortunately for the 56-year-old, his triumph was extremely short-lived, as police caught up to him just 11 minutes later. Thankfully, he didn't try to go out finger guns blazing, and was easily taken into custody and is now facing robbery charges. Reports jokingly state that no weapons or fingers were seized from St. Clair at the time of his arrest, which, if nothing else, means that he still ended up better off than this week's alleged home invader from North Carolina. He is currently being held in the county jail in lieu of a $10,000 bond. Representatives from Connecticut's Bristol Police Department say that 2 of their officers are dead this week, and a third is seriously injured, after they were ambushed by a 35-year-old gunman who allegedly lured them to the scene with a phony domestic violence call. According to reports, the situation began at around 10:30 p.m. on October 12th, when Bristol police received a 911 call about a possible domestic violence situation. The caller allegedly stated that 2 brothers were fighting at a residence on Redstone Hill Road. 3 officers responded to the initial 911 call, later identified as 35-year-old Sergeant Dustin DeMonte, 34-year-old Officer Alex Hamzy, and 26-year-old Officer Alec Iarato. However, what the men didn't know was that they were walking into a trap. After arriving at the scene, the officers reportedly called for one of the brothers at the property, 35-year-old Nicholas Brutcher, to come outside. However, Brutcher had apparently already been waiting for them. He was allegedly dressed in camouflage, armed with a rifle, and was in position ready to ambush them. When the officers left their patrol vehicles, Brutcher opened fire. According to terrified neighbors, they initially thought the sounds they heard was a car backfiring. However, when the noises didn't stop, they realized that it was gunfire. It's now estimated that Brutcher fired more than 80 rounds during the attack. Sadly, by the time backup arrived, it was already too late for 2 of the officers. Hamzy was pronounced dead at the scene, while DeMonte died after arriving at a local hospital. Iarato was also seriously injured during the shootout that was reportedly expected to survive. He managed to fatally hit Brutcher before being rushed to the hospital himself. Brutcher's 32-year-old brother Nathan was also allegedly shot during the incident, though his condition was not listed in any of the reports that we came across. While authorities say that they believe that Nicholas Brutcher purposely lured the police officers to his home with the intention of carrying out the shooting, the exact details of what led up to the attack remain unclear. According to one neighbor, Nicholas and Nathan were fighting, and Nathan may have been shot by his brother while trying to stop him from leaving the house with the weapon that he used to shoot the officers. At the current time, though, this has not been confirmed, and no official motive has been released in the case. The situation is still developing. Authorities in the city of Raleigh, North Carolina say that 5 people are dead this week and at least 2 others are injured after a teenage gunman went on a shooting spree near his house. According to reports, the incident began at around 5 p.m. on October 13th, when police received a call that multiple people had been shot in the city's Hedingham neighborhood. Witnesses stated that the shooter appeared to be in his early to mid-teens and had shot at least 2 people in the neighborhood before heading on to the nearby Neuse River Greenway, where the attack continued. As police combed the area, their worst fears were confirmed when more victims began to be discovered. In all, 7 people had been shot, with 5 tragically dying from their injuries. After a tense search that reportedly resulted in a multi-hour standoff, police were finally able to take the suspect into custody. While few details are currently available about how this situation played out, several reports allege that the teenage shooter was cornered in an outbuilding on a property roughly 6 miles away from the initial crime scene. Still, it appears that the standoff did not end peacefully, as the suspect reportedly suffered multiple injuries, including a gunshot wound to the head. Following the tragic shootings, the deceased victims were identified as 53-year-old Nicole Connors, 49-year-old Susan Carrantz, 35-year-old Mary Marshall, 29-year-old Gabriel Torres, and 16-year-old James Thompson. Few details have been released about the victims at this time, though it's said that Gabriel was an off-duty police officer on his way to work, while James was the suspect's older brother. The two surviving victims are said to be another police officer, Casey Clark, as well as a 59-year-old woman named Marcelle Gardner. It's said that Clark has since been released from the hospital, while Marcelle's condition is unclear. As for the shooter, now identified as 15-year-old Austin Johnson, he is said to be in critical condition. It's unclear if he will survive his injuries, but if he does, authorities have already indicated that they plan to charge him as an adult. At the time of this recording, no motive has been released behind the terrifying shooting spree. The situation is still developing. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a minute to thank our amazing supporters over on Patreon. As many of you are aware, our situation on YouTube always seems to be a bit uncertain, but our patrons help to ensure that we can continue to make content like this long term without having to worry as much about what surprises might be thrown our way. Plus, patrons also get access to 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. If you'd like to help support the channel directly, head over to patreon.com/crimezone to join. You can also find that link in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and take care.